We believe the same things. You stand to the side. Rebirth of hardcore pride. It all came true. Too bad you don't see the good things. God damn it. That I see. Hi, I'm Brian, and welcome to another episode of the Game Anthropologist. It's been a long time since I've really sat down and played video games. I have a pretty busy daily life now, but when I do, I get absorbed in it. That's why I'm sitting in front of my screen right now with my specialized controller. I got my mixed bag of snacks here, my 2-liter bottle of soda, and I got my scented candles, because that's how I roll. But being here reminds me of something I've wanted to talk about for a very long time now. Something that seems to cut right through the heart of gaming culture. The rigid dichotomy between hardcore gamers and casual gamers. As gamers, we've all come to believe that there is a definitive split within gamer culture between those who classify themselves as more into the hobby we hold dear. It's an exhaustive practice for gamers young and old to proclaim on their outlet of choice as to who is truly a worthy gamer. And it's also becoming more difficult to ignore the gaming industry's latest trend of a more laid-back fare when it comes to a new game release and the hardware that accompanies them. In fact, these gaming trends are so rampant that it's causing an even greater factionization amongst gamers, where even the slightest capitulation to either realm causes an automatic backlash from either side. It tends to leave a sour taste in the mouth of those outside the gaming community at large and serves only to forward the detractors of gaming culture. So I believe the time is right to finally confront this notion of a divide between the truly dedicated and the slightly interested in the end-all be-all battle that I'm calling hardcore versus casual. A never-ending argument of idiocy! God, this shrinking me? Jeez. Oh well. Now, I wouldn't dare suggest to you that this is an acceptable title in the APA style I'm so accustomed to, and it is a bit of me tipping my hand as to my personal opinion on the subject. But I want to relay my feelings on this matter right away for you. It's refreshing to be as upfront as possible. I see many tackle this subject from time to time trying to be objective, but ultimately letting their own opinions blind their observations. There's nothing wrong with having an opinion on this, as you'll soon see. It's just best to be upfront with it. So for this episode, we, as in the royal we mind you, will explore the very core of this debate and try to find a deeper understanding from where we as gamers are coming from on this. This exploration will take us to gamers of all stripes in an effort to find out what is hardcore and what is casual. We'll discuss the possible reasons for gamers to have such labels. We'll try to see if we can find some commonality in other similar media cultures. We'll also take a look at the impact this so-called war between the gamers has done to the culture as a whole, and we'll see if we can finally have a satisfying conclusion to all of this, for we have to understand what the reality actually is. So strap yourselves in, because this one's going to be a doozy. But in order for us to come to a greater understanding of this conflict, we must go back and start at the beginning. My god, that sounded just like Boris. I did not mean to phrase it like that, you guys gotta believe me. I won't bore you with the finer points at the beginning of video games. I'll just make the vague ass of you and myself and believing you know the story. The heady days of Ralph Baer and Nolan Bushnell, along with the multiple consoles with Vision in the title. The coin ops, the cabinets, the more advanced candy cabinets, you get the idea. It's old hat to discuss the history of games, so let's go beyond the games themselves and talk about who's actually playing them. Pong's a good place to start, obviously. Its humble beginnings were in the local bar scene of Central California, and the pioneers of gaming, the very epicenter of where the idea of a gamer started, were guys slinging back some Pabst Blue Ribbon and looking to pass the time. So yeah, video games are about as relevant as that decent pinball machine, but the die had been cast, and the gamer, for lack of a better term, had been born. These gamers were a model of the simplicity of the games they played, but as the technology improved, the gamer grew in complexity. This is where the model of the hardcore gamer began to rear its ugly head. It was subtle at first, starting out with a guy or gal that hung out a wee bit too long on one machine, morphing slowly into the ones that used to put the quarter or tokens on the cabinet to signal next game, and eventually into the unpleasant bravado that came from the very best and shunned all up-and-comers away. But something else was occurring during this gamer ascendancy, the rise of the home console gamer. The aforementioned early consoles provide an adequate substitute for the arcade gamer in its similar complexity and replayability. Gamers were primarily of a younger age, as reflected of the simplicity of the games they represented. However, as with arcade gamers, the home console gamers also began to evolve quite a bit. The technology improved with each new generation, especially with the renaissance of PC gaming, eventually propelling the home market past arcades completely. Gamers were constantly trying to catch up to each new innovation or maxing out the capabilities of their CPUs to accommodate the latest games. Cut to today, where the gaming landscape is now vast, with gamers, while differing in ages, sexes, and preferences, all represented the juggernaut of wealth and entertainment that gaming has now become. Now again, I have to stress that much of what I just said is not scientific in nature. Most of it's based on observation and my own personal experience. It's a hard task to see a new culture have life breathe into it for the first time. Anthropology is not really based on biology, in so much as the process begins with a primordial ooze and you see what materializes. A lot of it's based on observation, noticing trends, traits, social norms, and the like. Gaming culture has these variables which can be viewed and analyzed, which is where this episode of the clash between hardcore and casual gamers truly begins. I'm sure a lot of you already have a general idea from your own observations about what makes someone a hardcore or casual gamer. So let's break it down to the very basics. Let's start with the most obvious and probably the most befitting one, the length of time playing games. Statistics are all over the place on the average time gamers actually game. Most come from informal surveys and often have mixed agendas on the subject. But a few consistencies present themselves amongst the data. The hardcore gamer, in terms of length of gameplay, is labeled as someone who games for 15 to around 40 or more hours a week. This pretty wide gauge seems to be set for a comparison to an average work week for a part-time or full-time worker. Except in this case, the work is replaced by long gaming sessions. It's safe for people to assume that someone who plays games for those lengths would have a very vested interest, and thus someone who plays for less than that falls into the casual fold of gamers. That might be taking the concept of what is a casual or hardcore gamer a little too far. You play a lot of games, therefore you're a hardcore gamer. It's pretty standard, but if you substitute gaming with something else, reading, movie watching, weightlifting, you get the same observation, a hardcore subset of that culture. So it must go beyond simple play length. I think we can leave this concept behind for a bit and move on to something more substantive, the types of games you play. Halo. This is also an aspect of the debate that can be overstressed. It's a simple practice to make easy connections between what gamers play and where their overall place in gaming culture lies. In psychology, this is called a heuristic, using experience and learning to come to a satisfactory conclusion. In fact, this whole hardcore casual notion could be caused by one large heuristic method of thinking amongst gamers, a concrete notion that gamers that play the Gears of War trilogy are more hardcore and gamers that play games like Bejeweled are more casual, and nary the twain shall meet. The influx of these easy-to-make flash games and the advent of motion control have drawn a clear distinction between these gaming points of view. There's also the supposition that those of a certain age group, mainly those who fall on both sides of the 18 to 34 demographic, could never fit inside the hardcore sphere since games are tailored to their needs alone. Basing all of your understanding on what it means to be a hardcore or casual gamer on the games that are played seems to be another way to understand the debate, but there is one more aspect to consider: gaming knowledge and nostalgia. All the time in the world playing games that make heads explode literally means nothing if you don't know why that head exploded. Or, well, maybe not exactly that. But a knowledge of gaming is key into the consideration. Hardcore gamers stake their claims to having knowledge that exceeds those of the so-called casual spectrum. They know all the ins and outs, the history, and how to actually play the damn game. More appropriately, it specifically refers to involvement with games. Being ahead of the curve with each generation, opining the old days of the gaming media they love, and having a contrarian attitude to the advances of modern gaming. And there you go. It really comes down to length of time playing, types of games played, gaming knowledge. Then you really know whether you're a hardcore or casual gamer. Of course, that's not the whole story. It's never ever that simple. These three aspects do indeed dictate how people view gamers, that much is certain. It's just how do we apply these aspects to gamers and ourselves. Let's explore this a little deeper. Alright, so hardcore gamers play lots and lots of games. Yeah, seems right. They play these games for great lengths of time. And not just games, hardcore games. Games meant to test your mettle and dexterity, sure. Problem is that those defined as casual gamers do this as well. According to a recent study by Lightspeed Research on those who use social networking sites, 58% of those surveyed claim to have played a social networking game of some kind. Of those, 29% play the games daily, with another 24% playing several times a day. It breaks down even further, with 24% playing up to 2 hours a day and 10% playing 2 hours or more. But the most stunning number from this study is 17%, the respondents who feel they are addicted to playing these games. Addicted, eh? Well, there's that heuristic thing again, where you might conclude that those that play hardcore games play a lot longer and tend to be a lot more addicted than those that play these casual games. I did mention in a previous episode that there is some grumbling within the mental health community about the impact the length of time gaming has on the psyche of the gamer, though they seem to focus more on hardcore games as opposed to casual games. But why gloss over them? These so-described casual games offer the perfect rebuttal for every hardcore argument. The main argument for what is a hardcore or casual gamer really comes down to gaming aptitude. If you look at the length of time argument, you would know that this is a poor gauge for gaming aptitude. The average age of a gamer is 34 years old, and they've generally been playing games for 12 years, so they know games but lack the sufficient time to play the games due to the commitments of a job, family, or other concerns to be considered a hardcore gamer. Casual games are generally an easy to pick up and play option that offer a great amount of gameplay in short bursts that perfectly accommodate to those who don't have the time they used to have to play games. Plus they reverse the notion that a certain type of game fits with a certain type of gamer. Most of the debate comes from the transition that gaming seems to be going through right now.
For right now, the major companies have seen the fruits of the motion controls of the Wii and followed up with their own iterations. This has caused the lines in the gaming community to become clearly drawn and for self-described hardcore gamers to exclaim the death of game advancement.
The hardcore side felt that those who picked up on these new motion-controlled doodads are denigrating the advances of the past. But these are also the same types of gamers who opine for the simpler form of gaming. Easy pick-up and play, easy game saves, easy controls, actual gameplay over long cinematics. These new motion control games offer all of this.
Each game system that advanced always had something more intricate added to it. Though graphics were the obvious ones, the control scheme is the prime example. 1 button, 2 buttons, 8 buttons, analog stick. It set people at odds for something easy to pick up on to something you need to invest a great amount of time. More complicated control scheme led to more complicated gameplay. As stated earlier, gamers evolve, but not all gamers. Some were left behind. So game makers saw a need to reinvigorate the gamer population and continue to expand handheld systems to keep a steady flow of gamers, and came up with a motion control solution to the more advanced consoles.
And what about the rise of rhythm games as of late? DDR, Guitar Hero, DJ Hero, Rock Band. They're all easy to pick up and play. Hell, they're all glorified color-coded Simon games. But you can't deny those that dedicate a huge chunk of their time trying to complete the most complicated color-coded combinations on Expert.
I've seen some claim that these types of games show a so-called bridge between the casual and hardcore gamers. However, I think if you look more critically, it exemplifies that the types of game a particular gamer do not make. If you fall into the 34-year-old, 12-year average demographic I mentioned, then you had to have played games that only had a 2-button interface with simplistic graphics and linear gameplay. And you had the time to play those games because you had fewer responsibilities, i.e. school, chores, etc. We all have to start this long and glorious road of gaming somewhere, so criticizing the simplicity of some current generation hardware seems to be hypocritical.
But what about gaming knowledge? Nostalgia can cloud our judgment and cause us to harken back to a more primitive time in gaming, old control schemes, gameplay, etc. This allowing the hardcore gamer to beat his chest and claim those today don't realize what they're missing from the past, especially with the knowledge and history of video games. It's true you could be a better gamer by knowing the old ways, but it doesn't make you any better than any other gamer. In fact, it's counterproductive to the entire culture. There should be a new notion, and it should go like this. Trying to be the best gamer doesn't always bring out the best in gamers. So why do we constantly try to label gamers this way? The great literary mind of Christopher Hitchens is fond of saying that as humans, we are all pattern-seeking animals who will take a bogus theory over no theory at all. And this is very true with respect to video game culture. We as gamers seek to label our fellow gamers out of a sense of expediency that most cultures have been doing since the very beginning, skipping through the layers of complexity that the human condition offers.
This is seen in many other types of cultures. There's always a self-described hardcore element found within, like the weightlifting I mentioned earlier. Even an outsider like myself can attest that there are those who are a little more into it than others. But let's find something a little more similar to gaming culture. Cinema culture seems to be one of the obvious ones. You have those within that culture who claim to watch more movies, have a deeper knowledge of the vast history of cinema, and watch a wide variety of avant-garde and AAA features, while also looking down with patronizing eyes at the so-called popcorn flicks. Using the 3 factors I presented to label gamers, you see a pattern that's often seen in many other cultures from sports, to art, to music, and literature. I've even seen this pattern in the wonderful world of crossword puzzles. This interesting culture of puzzles was displayed brilliantly in the 2006 movie Wordplay.
I mean, you have everything from people who watch tons of movies, or people who play lots of trivia games or board games, to people who do lots of crossword puzzles, or even people who do Sudoku puzzles, for crying out loud. Pair? But why? Well, as you can tell, video game culture is not alone in identifying a hardcore or casual element within their respective culture, and oftentimes they use the same 3-pronged approach I have alluded to earlier. Now let's get into the technical facets of why we as gamers label.
There's a factor known as enculturation. This is a key concept that drives the study of anthropology, and is usually combined with aspects of socialization. It details the process by which a person learns the requirements of the culture by which they're surrounded. Those involved acquire the values and behaviors that seem appropriate and necessary in that culture. This factor seems very fitting for gaming culture at large.
Fitting in the sense that gamers aspire to be the types of gamers they believe they should be from their own observations. They collect what they perceive to be the absolute need of gaming culture in order to best assimilate. What seems appropriate for some is a full dedication to, and at times going above and beyond the craft, thus tilting towards a more hardcore slant, while others deem it necessary to absorb just enough knowledge of gaming culture and tend to tilt towards a more casual slant. Remember this guy I showed you earlier? Well, he's Howard S. Becker, renowned sociologist who came up with what is known as the labeling theory. This theory describes how self-identity and behavior of an individual can be influenced or even at times created by how that individual is categorized and described by others. Culture involves a lot of attitudes and behavior characteristics along with the ideas of a people. Ideas that can influence a gamer's identity to push their love of games to the limit and begin to identify others of the varying degrees of their involvement in the culture. Becker opened up a deeper understanding of why labeling occurs in a social construct, and it involves the nature of deviance.
Now, I know you associate deviance with, well, acts that reside within your own mind, but deviance in this sense deals with the acts within a culture. Becker spoke of deviance as a consequence of the application by others of rules and sanctions to an offender, that social groups create deviance by making rules whose infraction creates deviance, and by applying those roles to particular people and labeling them as outsiders.
Gaming culture, along with many other cultures, has these informal rules and social norms known as folkways. These are the types of habits that are for newcomers to accommodate to, but can sometimes be strictly enforced. Usually any violation of these folkways involves some kind of warning or admonishment.
Becker expounds that those who don't follow along with these folkways are deemed as deviant in that cultural structure. Somewhere in the culture of gaming, it became an acceptable practice for someone to be hardcore. Using Becker's method, we can postulate that this started out as a deviance for that culture, as the folkways were mainly just playing the games and passing the time. But though the label was meant to condemn, it instead reinforced the deviant behavior of that individual and was used to justify the hardcore gamer's actions. Now it seems that the acceptable folkways of gaming have tilted towards a more hardcore outlook, and the casual gamer now manifests as a deviance. I won't be able to give Dr. Becker's studies and conclusions any true justice concerning the topic of labeling and deviance in this short section, as I only touched on these theories to lend understanding to the nature of gaming's hardcore casual debate. So I implore you to check out the information on your own, especially his landmark book, Outsiders, that details the subject in full.
And for the reasons as to why we label? Well, there's really no concrete answer for that. Though it's widely believed there's a modern prohibition against lazy stereotyping, it's also widely known that it still exists. Gamers will label each other out of the same laziness as anyone else would do. And it can't be stated enough that there are forces from without and within that seek to label us all as either casual or hardcore. The within has many nuances and advanced anthropological and sociological factors to consider. The without is a bit easier to understand.
Fear of the other. It's a concept that's as old as society itself. It's present in the modern xenophobic notions of the most ardent believer to the most isolated tribal community. And it's definitely a factor from outsiders looking into gaming culture. From the self-proclaimed champions of children's welfare to the aptly described no fun squad, there are always those looking at gamer culture who exhibit the traits found in fear of the other. Suspicion, distrust, misrepresentation, and a good dose of labeling.
And these outside forces can have an impact on gamers. We're talking associative learning, operant conditioning. Think Pavlov or B.F. Skinner, associating violent video games and poor gaming behavior with an undesirable hardcore element while allowing positive reinforcement in the form of praise, within reason of course, of the burgeoning casual games and those that play them. Again, this isn't a glimmering link as to why we use the labels of hardcore and casual. It's just something else for you to consider next time you hear about the outrage du jour over a hardcore game interspersed between clips of the recent crop of casual games.
Fear of the other allows those on the outside looking in to point the finger at the apparent dysfunction of the hardcore gamer, using the factors I presented earlier as fodder for their hyperbolic claims, and also to prop up the so-described casual gamer as a viable alternative. But in the end, these outside forces really don't drive the debate as much as the gamers themselves. There's always going to be a tension between a new media culture such as gaming and the global cultures at large.
It's the nature of things. It doesn't require either side to give an inch, but it does require a bit of consideration and a bit of understanding for all to truly thrive. There's something else to consider. Unrealized or not, there's definitely been an impact from this hardcore casual confrontation, and man, it ain't pretty. It's time to dive into the muck and the madness.
Cultural hierarchy was one of my propositions to help explain why gamers get angry at games, though that was more of a running theory than actual proven fact. However, there's something to it in this case.
Self-proclaimed hardcore gamers have taken their place in gaming culture's hierarchy in terms of the haves, and have designated the so-called casual gamers as the have-nots, the latter term meaning they have not the gaming knowledge, the time, or the proper games.
It can also have a physical application, as the early days of gaming involved the hardcore element owning the most, be it consoles, games, or accessories, and leaving all others in the dust. That was the effect that the filmmakers were trying to convey with Lucas from The Wizard, and his mere possession of the Power Glove, though obviously that argument of having more swag, or crap in this case, is negligible at best.
There was indeed a good amount of jealousy to be found amongst the kiddies who had more than one console at their house. Or even this thing. It sets up an easy scenario of the notion of the rich versus the poor, which is indeed a hierarchical structure, but maybe a little too broad to scrutinize for just gamers. But it's a good place to start, adding to the pretension that the home console gamers were beginning to exude.
This pretension only got worse in the digital age. A steady crop of sites and forums dedicated to retro gaming sprung up out of a desire for nostalgia. But what began with the best intentions to remember the old ways of gaming soon devolved into a litmus test for those with the greatest gaming knowledge, and leaving others not even the ability to question the past without getting slapped down. Not to mention the more marquee websites out there that have unfortunately allowed a framework for degradation of gamers that do not follow the accepted paradigm put forth.
It's not true of all these sites. There are plenty of great sites out there who don't worry about who's hardcore or casual or other petty arguments. The point is that you no longer have to travel to another's house to encounter such affectation. It can now be ported right to your very own home, through the wonders of the internet, and especially in the realm of online gaming.
Again, I've mentioned this before. People screaming in your ear about you sucking because they've dedicated the time to the game, know the ins and outs, lol fag, etc., etc. It's important to remember this in the overall quandary of the hardcore casual debate. It's usually generated from gamers considering themselves hardcore, not being very circumspect with their statements. In my travels, I've heard many scream about gamers they perceive as not hacking it to go back to games that are more their style. In other words, casual and not worthy of attention or respect.
It's comical and easy to ignore, much like the slings and arrows of the hardcore elements found on online forums. And these gamers make up about 40 to 42% of the entire gamer population. But mentioning them leads me to what I think is the most pernicious influences of the hardcore casual debate: the treatment of female gamers.
Let's face it, female gamers are most certainly outnumbered by their male brethren to varying degrees depending on what statistics you follow. And unfortunately, that disparity has led to the conventional wisdom being that girls do not play video games. Or if they do, they fall into the spectrum of either a pathetic girl with no life or a sexy girl with no brains. Either way, they're perceived to be casual gamers and nothing more. Unfortunate slander to be true, and probably not helped by the online videos of scantily clad girls forcing themselves to play games for the amusement of a few.
This conventional wisdom is an amusing misnomer about female gamers if you really think about it. From my own experience, I know many girl gamers who have played the most self-described hardcore games with varying degrees of excellence. It's an absolutely moronic statement to claim that female gamers are only into games about girly things, or are posers pretending to be into the more hardcore fare.
And here's where it gets really not funny. I came upon a great website entitled FatUglyOrSlutty.com. Great in the sense that it really opened my eyes to where this hardcore casual debate has officially gone over the edge. The name's derived from the notion that if you're female and you game, you're either fat, ugly, or slutty. 3 female gamers were fed up with the abuse they received in various online forums and created a compendium of said insults, and even outright threats that they and other female gamers receive on a daily basis. If you have the patience, I implore you to go through this site with very open eyes and understand why this nonsense has to stop.
This really stuck in my craw. It goes beyond overstatement to say how deplorable some of these gamers are, and it seems to be a pervasive sentiment entrenched in gamer culture, that hardcore is the way to go and casual is an unwelcome usurper that should be threatened and lambasted back to obscurity. And I think if you look a little closer, you might see that the real villains in this saga aren't the gamers themselves, but the ones making the games.
Gaming companies have spent a great deal of time and money in making gamers want games. They've strived to push the demographics of gaming even further by introducing these new game innovations. And for the most part, they've succeeded. But these companies have also exacerbated the supposed hardcore casual divide. You see this especially in the marketing of their products over the last 15 years, which corresponds with the early generation's coming of age. There was certainly a gradual progression to more hardcore ads for games and consoles as time went by, making it clear that each generation had to be more mature than the last. And they, whether they meant to or not, created a divide.
A divide they marketed with gusto. Remember associate learning and conditioning? Advertisements are meant to influence people, either in a subtle way or overtly. They influenced early adopters and a new generation of gamers into believing this divide was real. And they used the new media capabilities of the World Wide Web to reach gamers on a scale never before realized until a perception was gained.
The perception that the gaming corporations exploit to convince gamers to put in the long hours, to collect all of the games, and, as the current view of the gaming industry is presented, accept games that are now more expensive, take longer to develop, have shoehorned features, and content only accessed through pay-for-play downloads.
Not to mention the casual market they prop up, releasing a great deal of shovelware games to appeal to a greater market, and at the same time alienating hardcore gamers that they've built up, to the point where they feel the need to introduce hardcore notions to casual concepts, and otherwise making an even bigger mess of things and hurting gaming altogether.
And when you combine all the factors, the employing of game companies' marketing, gamers at large are influenced by this and respond to as such, giving substance to misinformed factoids about how gamers are perceived, all flowing through the web via social media, online forums, and internet gaming, and back again. It's a continuous cycle.
It now seems amplified by another factor crawling from the web portion: the self-described spokespersons of gaming.
I only want to touch on this for a moment, but it is important. The rise of internet personalities has created additional problems of those who are perceived as posers to gaming, or those who proclaim themselves the champion of all gamers.
A proclamation that is unfounded and very much unwarranted. Gaming doesn't need a spokesman, it speaks for itself, and it's welcome to all comers. And the problem with having one is that it builds resentment in gamers in two ways. Resentment that this spokesman isn't a clear representation of their interests, i.e. the hardcore or casual enthusiasts, and that someone would have the gall to claim to be the spokesman for all gamers. The latter grouping seem to exacerbate the traits gaming companies believe all gamers display.
Again, I don't want to point out any individual or collective by name, but to show you that just like the retro websites and forums before them, these internet personalities may be inadvertently making the divide greater and letting it fully manifest in the eyes of gamers and outsiders alike.
I mean, you see me throughout this episode changing shirts. Yes, I have a lot of gaming shirts. This room I'm in has a lot of video game posters and various items of video game awesomeness. Ooh, I have this. Mario candies, they're supposed to be really good. Oh, God, dang, that's awful. Music knowledge. I bet I can guess more old school compilations than you can, and in short time. Can you guess this one? How about this one? Better yet, this one. What? You couldn't guess it? I only needed a second, I guessed it right away. I'm wearing a freaking Sonic Snuggie! I'm awesome, right? Am I a hardcore gamer, a casual gamer? Better question, am I a better gamer than you? Or anyone else? Sure, I look stylish, classy, and a colossal dork, but it doesn't make me a better gamer for having it, nor should any conclusions be made as to my manufactured status within gaming culture. So, what would I like you to take away from this episode? If anything, I want you to question the existence of a hardcore or casual gamer. I referred to it as idiocy earlier out of my own subjective opinion because there's really nothing concrete to this. What's hardcore to one gamer is casual to another, or vice versa. The definition just seems so schizophrenic in places. I mean, is this what we want? Is this good culture? If not, what makes a good culture?
Gaming, by its very nature, is intended to be social. It began with its initial offering of social interaction in the arcades of old and continues even stronger with PC and home consoles' expansion to even greater online play. If you recall, I made a video where I talked about my moment when I knew that I became a gamer. And there are a lot out there who play games but don't consider themselves gamers. They actually haven't had their moment yet. The newer innovations expand demographics and open up for people who don't normally relate to gaming to have their own moment, where they make gaming an important aspect of their life.
Famed anthropologist Arthur Krober's influential superganic notion views culture as having almost a life of its own, molding each individual more than that individual molds the culture. I believe this is the best way to understand the overall argument of hardcore or casual gaming. Yeah, some of these new innovations can be counterproductive or even deplorable in some circles, but it's up to the gamer to understand the minutiae in all facets of gaming. Remember, anthropology is a lot of observation. In a way, we're all like anthropologists. We all observe gaming and try to understand it in our own way.
We always refer to gaming as a community. Its most basic definition pertains to a group of people claiming a similar trait, in this case, video games. It stands at the center, with a Venn diagram making up the rest of the quirks and idiosyncrasies. If gamers continue to break up this diagram in a vain attempt at easy labeling, they establish an unfalsifiable argument. An argument that can never be easily proven, and truly not as easy to disprove. Whether you agree with that notion or not, you have to look deep down within and realize that none of this matters. Not what they say, not what the mighty gaming corporations say, and to an extent, not even what I say. You know what you like, you know what you want, and you know you're a gamer without the extra sub-labels attached.
As with all things I observe, I don't have all the answers. This isn't some self-righteous crusade on my part, nor do I claim to speak for all gamers. What I do know is that we as gamers have to move past this faux war between hardcore and casual gamers. We serve only to make it easy for our detractors to paint us with a broad brush, or for others to be alienated not to join the medium. A culture survives and thrives by opening up and including others. True, there is the hankering to revert back to the exclusivity that gaming once bred, an activity a collection of geeks would partake in lieu of, well, other activities, but those days are long gone. The dam is bursted and gaming is more mainstream and inclusive than ever before, and it really is a good thing.
Let me leave you with this, a video of my friend Eric, known to many of you guys as Ace Salieri. He told me about how he had to sell off his gaming collection a few years back, a regretful but necessary decision on his part. So I decided to do something that I implore all those who are willing and able to do. Give the gift of gaming.
We just got an NES from our friend Brian in the mail.
Yeah,
And
we're playing
Mario 1 here.
and Jade is just entranced. Look how how happy she is.
Yeah.
Ah,
Here it's not about how the game is old, nostalgic, or in need of gentrification. It's just about how this console and this game make each individual in this video feel.
But this has so much potential.
And that's what it's all about. I'm the Game Anthropologist, bringing you closer, even if it takes one small family at a time, to video game culture.